So the biggest thing is that normally poses look like this. They're really stiff. And we want our poses to go from this to this. Something that looks a little bit more lively, realistic, and just human. Today I'm not only going to show you how to use the 3D tools in Clip Studio, but also how to fix all of the stiffness problems. So let's get started. It's been a little bit, I guess, since I did another one of these videos, but what are we learning today? Using 3D as reference for illustrations, comics, whatever. It's also great if you have like a really complicated camera angle that you're going for and you're not entirely sure what it's supposed to look like without having to try and duct tape your phone to the roof to get a good picture. But there is one thing that most everyone universally complains about when using 3D reference, and that is stiffness. It doesn't look realistic, it doesn't look lively like we really do. Today I'm going to show you not only how to use the 3D models that are available in Clip Studio, as long as you own Clip Studio for free, but I'm also going to teach you how to pose them and fix the stiffness issues. How are we going to do this? By using 3D animation principles. That's pretty much where I came from, is from a 3D background. If you'd like to learn more about animation principles yourself, there is a video that I will link in the card and down below in the description that goes over all of the principles of animation, and it uses Miraculous Ladybug as the reference to showcase all of these different principles. So if you're interested, you can check that out after. Before we can dive too deep in, I need to show you how to even get to this point. Like, how do I even get the model in here? So we're just going to use an illustration. You can use this in the comics section as well. You can use it in the Webtoons section. It doesn't really matter. Any canvas will do. And then I'm going to go over to my sidebar and I'm going to open just one of these. It doesn't matter which one I pick. I can just pick the top one if I want. You're going to look at your list of assets and you want to go to the 3D section. Go ahead and click the little arrow to bring it down to body type, and you'll see that there are a bunch of different 3D bodies that come pre-installed on Clip Studio. There's also more that I think you can download from their asset library, but I just use the ones that are here. So the two that I like to use are the more realistic body types, and that's the ones that I'll be showcasing today, but these tricks will work on any body type that you decide. So just click, drag, and drop. Give it a minute to think, and you'll see that you now have a 3D person in your scene. You'll know that it's still 3D by the little icon in the bottom corner in that layer. If you select off of that layer, you'll notice that like I can move around the scene and it won't actually affect the character. I have to be on that layer in order to like pretty much manipulate him. In order to get to the point where you can start moving him around, you're going to want to use this operation icon button tool. Go ahead and select that and that'll bring up all of the ways that you can basically mess with the 3D figure. In the dragon tutorial, which I did last month, the month before, I went over all of the different camera buttons that go along the top, and as well as like moving an object through 3D space, but not how to actually manipulate the object itself, because we were just using a box. It didn't have any bones to move, like wrists or necks or anything like that. So it's going to be a little bit more complicated. In order to use the camera, I'll go through it really quick. You can just click and drag around the scene and it will rotate around him. If you want to move in and out of the scene, you can right click on your mouse and drag and it will zoom us closer or farther away. And if we want to like move him and like put him somewhere else in the frame, middle mouse click. If you have one of these like gaming mouses, gosh, that's bright. If you have one of the gaming mouses, there's like a scroll wheel. That's your middle mouse button. That's what I'll be referring to as middle mouse button. Middle mouse button, click and drag, kind of pan him through the scene. So those are the camera controls. Now we're gonna go into the actual like controls for the character. If you mouse over the character, you'll see different parts of the body light up. This is basically your selection of what bone you want to control. So if I click on the elbow, you'll notice that I have this rotation control that I can rotate his elbow. But if I click on like the wrist part, you'll notice that it has 3 controls. because the wrist can move in 3 different directions where the elbow only goes back and forth. So these are the different axes that you can rotate on. Now obviously like our wrists are freeform, but how it works in 3D is that you will have like a front back control, a side control, and then like the third control. There's X, Y, and Z axis if you know math. So you can click on any of these lines and then pull it or push it and it'll rotate in that axis. Red line will go side to side, green line will do this other side to side. Each of these are controlled separately, so if I click the forearm up here, obviously our shoulder can rotate in any direction so it gets all 3 axes. There's another way that you can control the character as well. If you single click, you notice it'll snap back and forth between these 2 different modes. So this mode that has the dots on it will let you click and drag the arm, and the elbow and the shoulder will follow. If you're familiar with 3D, this is basically FK versus IK switch. If you're not, just ignore everything I said, it doesn't matter. So when you click on one of these dots, you'll notice you get arrows as well as rotators. So these arrows are how you can move along an axis. So if I wanted my hand just to move to the right or to the left, I could click it with an axis. If I click the dot itself and move it around, then I can move in any axis. But the problem is that sometimes, because it's 3D, you'll think it's in a good spot and then you'll rotate the character and the arm will be like way back here. You can't see it because of the camera angle that you're at. So you want to be constantly moving the camera as you're posing your character, because sometimes you're like, oh, this looks good, like his hand's totally on his hip, right? Then you rotate and you're like, oh, it's not anywhere near it. And you'll want to use these axes to really narrow down where his hand is supposed to be. Does that make sense? So there's the 2 different ways, and you can snap between them by just tapping or clicking if you're using a mouse. You just want to make sure that you're selecting the same zone when you click, because if you just single click regularly, you'll move around the body, but if you click that same location again, then it'll pop in between them. And that's basically how you manipulate and can control the entire body. I'll give you a tip as far as what I do. I grab the wrist and I put the hand where I want it. So like if they're pushing on a door, I'll put the hand on the door, and then I'll grab the elbow and I'll decide like if I want it to be more up or down, because the wrist will stay still and the elbow will move back and forth. So then I can like put the hand where I want it and then tweak the pose by like moving the elbow or moving the shoulder up or down, and the hand pretty much stays still. So that's always how I end up doing it, is like put the foot where you want the foot and then tweak using the other controls. That's my method. You can do however you wish. We've gone over basically how to use these models in Clip Studio, but the big thing that I want to teach you guys now, how to fix the stiffness problem. So the solution to this lies in learning like actual 3D animation principles. The way that I like to think about it as a concept, when you are posing out the character, think of your own body as reference and to do the pose. So for example, let's say I want to do a pose where someone is like slouching and drawing on a canvas, right? And then I think in my head, okay, so someone who's like knee deep in thought in drawing. Maybe they have their hand resting like on the monitor. Maybe they are leaning their head and like tapping the pen to their lip as they're like thinking, right? Notice that as I get into this pose, I feel my neck curving, my head is tilted and then tilted forward as well. My shoulder, my left shoulder is higher than my right shoulder is. And like my eye line is gonna go down to the Cintiq, so my chin is coming in towards my throat, right? Like these are the things that I'm keeping in mind as I do the pose, because these are the things that are going to help me make the pose look better, is all of these little movements. The stiffness problem isn't because the big overall pose is bad. It's because all of the little tiny muscles aren't correct as like a normal human being would sit. They feel more like Barbie dolls. Although thinking and feeling the pose out is where you want to eventually end up, I realize that that isn't something that you are going to be used to doing, right? Because this is a new skill set. 3D in general is a skill set, just like drawing or painting. Kind of wrap your brain around that concept until you can really feel it. I'm going to give you the biggest issues as like a checklist for you to go through with your poses until you get to that point where you can just feel it out for yourself. So hopefully this kind of shortcuts your learning for now. The biggest problems in 3D poses that I see. First is symmetry, especially in the legs and a bit in the arms as well. For some reason, when you first start posing, people really like symmetry, like the feet. People will leave the feet planted just like this, which is really strange to me because nobody ever stands like this. As human beings, we have weight to us, right? Which means that symmetry is never really possible. We're always going to have like one muscle that's slightly stronger than the other one. We're going to have a leading foot. We're going to have a dominant hand. Like, all of these things dictate how we pose ourselves as humans. If you get up right now, and you can watch the video and stand up right now, and you'll notice that like one foot will be rotated slightly more to the right and the other one might be like full forward. And that's just you regular standing. Like, there's little inconsistencies that humans have. As a pass that you want to do when you're looking at your pose is, do I have everything symmetrical? Because if it is, I need to muck it up a little bit with humanity and kind of break the symmetry. The next thing that's on the checklist is weight and balance. So think of where your weight is being distributed and notice that we as humans never 50-50 our weight. There's always going to be a foot, a leg, a body rotation, like your center of mass is going to be slightly off, whether that's forward, backward, left, right, slightly in the corner. Your balance is going to dictate your pose and how your footing is. Like, if you're low to the ground, you want to lower your center of balance. So because of that, knees are going to bend, right? And you're going to pull your chest in towards your hips and center of balance together as low as possible. Where if you're standing up and you're reaching for something, right, your balance is going to go, as I'm reaching up this way, my balance is going to go this way, right? My center of mass is going to go this direction as my arm reaches up this direction. So this foot, so I'm reaching up with my right hand. As I'm reaching up, the opposite leg is going to be the one that has the weight. So my right leg, which is underneath my right arm, is probably going to be extended, my knee slightly more locked out, because joints, when they lock out, they don't normally bear weight. Weight-bearing joints normally bend a little bit because they have the weight on them, right? This side leg should be bent a little bit because it's the one bearing the weight, because I'm reaching up with this arm. That's what I mean by like weight and balance. Keeping in mind that when the character is doing something, where is their center of mass? And whatever direction that is forcing in is going to be where the body is going to need to bend and hold that position. The next biggest issue that I see is the spine. People leave the spine like stick straight all the time. It's the biggest problem that I see. If you learn one thing from this video, use the spine when you're posing. If I'm gonna put my arms down like this, my spine is gonna rotate forward. It's going to curve in, right? If I put my arms down like this, where like with the arm example, my spine is rotating up to the left. If I was gonna draw that as a line, it wouldn't be a straight line, it would be a curve. So keep that in mind when a character is even sitting, right? Like, even if you're sitting proper posture, my spine is going backwards slightly. Like, my shoulders and my hips might be in the same location, but my spine is going to create like a C curve between them. It's not going to be a straight line. As someone is walking, right? They're walking, they're throwing their weight forward. There's a good chance that their hips are going to be behind their chest. So because of that, it's going to create a curve as well. It's not going to be a straight line. Our spine is made of a bunch of little tiny bones that all have muscles that can do the snake, can do the worm. So keep in mind that the spine should always have some form of curve to it, a C curve or an S curve. Also, a thing to remember with the spine is that it moves in a way that other bones don't because it's like a snake. So because of that, it doesn't just, right, bend one direction like an elbow, or even like in a circle like your shoulder. The spine rotates and curves and can like twist around itself. It's the only bone in our body, or section of bones in our body, that let you genuinely like twist and curve. So our spine doesn't just go this way and this way, right? It doesn't just go left and right and then up and down. It actually curves in towards us as well, right? So keep that in mind with the spine, is that it can create like a weird shape. Most realistic looks play with this three-dimensional aspect of the spine. And then I want to get into a little bit of feminine and masculine poses. So feminine poses move more in the hips and the lower body. Feminine poses are normally more limber and more flexible. So you're going to get even more twists and curves out of a feminine pose, where a masculine pose is more forward or backward centered and mostly rotate through the upper torso. The body makes more of a grounded square approach to the ground. The hips and the lower back don't really rotate as much, and they are more of a square shape between the top and the bottom. It will just create a C bend instead of an S bend. Think of masculine poses as a string connected to the chest that pulls forward or backward or left or right, but doesn't as much twist or tweak in a direction. That's a lot of theory stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and showcase to you guys a little bit of posing and how I do posing. What is the emotional state of your character? I am gonna sit in a chair when I am happy, different than I'm gonna sit in a chair when I'm depressed. If I'm gonna I'll showcase a little bit here. If I'm angry and I'm gonna sit down, I might do one of these, or sad, listless, or really happy and excited and wanting to like, let's go, let's get it started. Those are some examples of thinking about the character's emotional state and what they're feeling before you get into the pose. So that's the first thing I think about. Second thing is, let's go ahead and let's fix some bad poses, shall we? The emotion of this character is that I want him just enjoying the sunrise or the sunset on a beach is kind of where my thought process was at. They were just closing their eyes, enjoying the sun, and then suddenly there's a shadow over them and a character is leaning over them being like, hey, what are you up to? Right? So that's kind of the vibes that I was going for. Very chill, relaxed, but just a breath of fresh air. So I really wanted to exude that sort of confident, relaxed feeling. So as you can see, I fiddle a lot around with the arms and figuring out the weight of how the upper body is going to take that weight, which shoulder is going to be, more up, which one is going to be more down. I also play around a lot with the hips, trying to decide which hip is going to be taking more of the weight and which one is going to be less affected by his weight. The other thing that I try and keep in mind is that I try and take a step back of the image and rotate the camera constantly, because I'm really trying to get the overall feel of the pose, and I really want it to, feel correct, that it feels human, right? And it doesn't feel so stiff and doll-like. So in order to create something that I felt like looked correct, I had to continually keep moving the camera around and tweaking here and there, shoulder up, shoulder down, hip movements. I'm also keeping the spine in check, that I want, mostly straight spine because I want more of a masculine pose, but I do want a little bit of a C curve in this one. And so I'm figuring out if I want that curve besides the front to back, if I want a little bit of side to side motion as the shoulder and the hip that are both bearing the weight are on the same side. So a little bit harder, and I do have to keep that sort of curve in there, even though technically between 2 points, right, it would be a straight line. Here's another example of that exact same pose, but in a different mental state. Maybe just a little annoyed or depressed, kind of more of a sad, somber. So this one instead, right, we have one shoulder that's bearing more of the weight and the other one is not. We have this hip, again, that's taking more of the weight as well, and the other one it's pulled up more. We have this nice S curve that's happening. One shoulder is clearly more dominant than the other. Notice that the one bearing weight isn't locked out, and we have the hands at slightly different angles. So there's another pose of the exact same basic pose, but in a more interesting, less stiff kind of way. So those are a couple of examples of how I would do poses in 3D. But again, those are my tips and tricks, and hopefully they help you keep away from the super stiff robo poses that seem to plague the 3D reference environments of the world. Just as a reminder and a wrap up, is 3D is a skill, just like learning to draw. So a lot of people think that 3D is just like a shortcut, when in actuality it's a skill set in of itself. So it's going to take time for you to practice creating poses to be good at making 3D reference poses look good. Just keep practicing until it becomes second nature, where you start to, like I said, feel the poses out, and then when you look at them you'll be like, oh, the shoulders are too square. But it's just another skill to add to your tool belt as far as reference that you can use. Since it's free with Clip Studio, you might as well. Thanks again for your support. If there's something in comic creation that you'd like me to cover in the next video, make sure to comment it down below. Hopefully you find this helpful, and may I wish you non-stiff poses.